Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next story. Our last story, actually. I don't like I don't say I don't like time warps, but time warps and portals and stuff like that, portals to other dimension, always scare me because you think that they're probably one of the most mundane Fordian weird things that can happen. Like Bigfoot is just like this big dude who hangs out in the woods. People are looking for him all the time, but he's kind of contained to certain areas. You don't want to see a ghost, don't go to a haunted house. You don't want a succubus to come in your house, don't summon one, stuff like that. But portals are creepy because you just don't know where they're going to pop up. And assuming they exist in the first place. But the idea of like walking through the woods or walking to school or something, and then all of a sudden, warp, you just disappear. And then no one ever knows what happened to you. People are like, oh, whatever happened to Jason Carpenter? His podcast just ended that day. And they're like, well, he did rack up quite the enemy list in 125 episodes. But I'm really just floating around in this weirdo dimension. But, most people who go missing are found dead, or they're runaways, or they're not found, they're returned home. They're just like, hey, mom, hey, dad, yeah, I was just over at my boyfriend's house. Like, that's the majority of missing person cases. But there are the cases where people just go missing, and then for the longest time, people go, well, we don't know what happened to them. And for most of those cases, also, I'm sure they're dead. We just never find them, or they're spirited away to some other country or whatever. But we have this interesting story. This story takes place in the year 1978, and we're in the Lake Michigan area. Now, there has been talk about the Lake Michigan Triangle or the Great Lakes Triangle, how these are areas of abnormal disappearances with boats and airplanes and people and stuff like that. I have a real problem with those designations because I could draw a triangle over any geographical area with high traffic and pick out 10 stories. It's super easy to do. And then go, look at 10 people went missing in the past 30 years. Isn't that weird? And you're like, wait, what? But if I tell those stories right, I can make it sound weird. Really, I could draw a triangle over from Hood River to Portland to, I don't know, somewhere else here, Gresham. And I'm sure all have at least 10 bizarre disappearances. So there was a bunch of women who went actually missing up here in Hood River like a summer or two ago. Or it wasn't just women, they were hikers. And I was like, oh, serial killer. And people are like, no, people disappear from here all the time because they go on hiking trails and disappear. And I was like, I don't know. That was actually before the podcast. But I think they found 2 of their bodies. One of them was weird. One of them jumped in the river or something like that. But anyways, the point being is that you can take any geographical area and draw lines around it and say, there's weird stuff in here. So I really dismiss the idea. I like the idea of the Bermuda Triangle just because it's longevity. I don't really give it much credence as a real phenomenon because boats and planes, it's one of the most highly trafficked areas in the western Pacific Ocean. That's what I'm trying to say. So, but whatever. But these new ideas, they're like, oh, look at this triangle. I don't give much credence to it. There is you know what? I'm not even going to do the episode. Here, hold on a second. This was going to be this. I'm going to say this real quick. I was going to make it its own segment. It's pretty much falls into what I've just been saying. This particular segment of the man, I know it's getting confusing now. Okay, let me back up. So Sean on YouTube sent me a story about a man eating stone, a stone that eats people. And I looked into it, and it was this guy writes kind of this nonfiction, fiction kind of legends of an area, and he's the only person who's ever stated that there's a stone that eats people. And the stone that eats people, it's in Vermont. He's like, maybe a stone's eating them. What? And what he's referring to is in Vermont, there's a thing called the Bennington Triangle. It's a triangle that's full of missing people. People go missing here all the time. Listen to this craziness. From 1945 to 1950, 6 people went missing in the wilderness. So, I mean, like, that's nothing. Like, they'll always draw, and thanks, Sean, for the recommendation. Like, I'm not saying that it was a bad story or anything, but I couldn't really feel anything more in that. Some of the disappearances were weird, like it could have been a killer, but it doesn't mean... One of the stories was a kid was sitting in his car and the mom went to go to the grocery store, and when she came back, the kid was missing, and they never found him. How did a rock eat him? Like, how is this author saying that maybe rocks are eating people when one of the missing people is a kid in a car? Was he listening to rock music and it came out of the speakers? So... Bennington Triangle, the Great Lakes Triangle, the Michigan Triangle, all that stuff. I don't really give it any credence. But the reason why I'm talking about it is because this particular, and again, thanks Sean for the man-eating stone story. The reason why I'm talking about all of the triangle stuff is because people have tried to take the actual real-life story of Stephen Kubacki and fit it into this weird mystical stuff. Yeah, a couple boats and planes have gone missing in Lake Michigan. It's a giant lake. Basically a sea. Stuff's gonna sink. But anyway, so Steve Kubacki. It's February. It's 1978. Lake Michigan. He says, hey mom, hey dad. He's an adult, but whatever. Hey mom, hey dad, I'm going to go skiing. I'm going to go ski in the area of Lake Michigan. Because it's all frozen. And they're like, okay, son, see you later. So he goes out to the lake. Now, he doesn't come home. And at first people are worried, but then more time passes and they're like, well, that's weird. Steven's not someone who's just going to disappear. So they begin searching for him. They find his footprints leading up to the frozen lake. They mysteriously stop. Now my first, and I could be wrong on this, but my first idea when I read that sentence was, can you leave footprints on ice? Like, if you're walking on the lake, if they lead up to the lake and he was going to walk across the lake, do you leave footprints on ice? How does snow sit on an ice lake? I don't know. But anyway, so his footprints led up to that. They found, I think it was his jacket by the side of the lake. And then oddly enough, when they were continuing searching for him, when they doubled back to that area, they found his backpack as well. I'm always also a little iffy on that type of stuff, because it means either someone set the backpack there, what's more likely was the backpack was covered up by the snow or whatever. But anyway, so that was the story. 15 months later, there's a knock on the Kubacki family door. They open it up, and there's Stephen. And Stephen, this is a weird story. And you could read into it a lot of different ways. But Stephen basically tells his family, he goes, I don't know what happened to me for the last 15 months. No idea. He goes, all I know was that I just woke up 40 miles from my home, where I'm at right now. Mother, father. You recognize me, right? They're like, yeah, Stephen, quit being a weirdo. Just tell us the story. And he goes, okay, sorry. He goes, what I remembered was I woke up 40 miles from this home. I was wearing clothes that weren't mine. I had never owned these clothes before. And I was carrying a satchel, which is not mine. And the satchel was full of maps. But I'm home. And the field he ended up in that was 40 miles from his family's home was 700 miles from Lake Michigan. And that's it. He has refused to give comment on this story. He doesn't talk about it at all. He's actually a practicing psychologist in Seattle now. He's a real person. He really did go missing, all that stuff. And he doesn't talk about it. You answer no questions. He says, I don't remember. Now, let's unpack that for a bit. One, people go missing on purpose all the time. They're called runaways. And that's possible. And then he may have had a change of heart and decided to come back home for whatever reason. Two, he could have gone through some sort of weird portal and have no memory of what happened. And just woke up in the field and be like, what? Where am I? Whose clothes are these? What's the satchel? Maps! Like, he could have had that progression of realizations. But there's also the possibility that he disappeared and does remember what he saw, but he knew that, one, if he told anyone, they'd think he was crazy, think he was making it up. And two, if he told anyone for the rest of his life, people would be asking him, so how did the gnomes taste? So what pinkleberry was the best one to write on in your magical adventure in that other dimension? Like, he could have just been like, you know what? That was a horrible place. I mean, it was full of magic and whimsy and wonder, but I don't want to talk about it the rest of my life. I'm just going to tell people I forgot and move on. Quite odd. And you know what's interesting, too, is that I'm surprised. Every article I read kind of had the same information, which makes me a little suspicious about the story overall. But you would think if someone went missing and they had this search effort for him, generally they bill the family if the person ran away. Like, if you went missing and then it turns out because of your own negligence, you went missing or you were just running away, they'll sometimes bill the family, and that didn't happen in this case. But who knows? It was funny because the thing that intrigues, I think, everybody when you hear that story is like, maps? What are the maps? Like, what? Maps of what? And so I read it and it just said he had a satchel full of maps. And I was thinking, so are they like magical maps? Like, were they showing him maps to get out of the fairy realm? Was it just maps of local, like, tourist traps? And then I read another article, and it said he had a satchel full of strange maps. And I go, that is, you're making that part up. You added that word in. Because if they were strange maps, you would definitely tell us why they were strange or what was strange about them. They're just adding to the mystery. Strange maps. Whatever, dude. Like, don't add stuff. Don't make stuff up. The story's weird enough. You don't have to add in strange maps. Because what? What was strange about them? Anyways, so who knows? Who knows if the story's real? The story could be totally made up. He could have made it up. It could be an internet legend. And the guy really exists. That's why he doesn't want to talk about it. He's like, ugh. But let's assume that it's real for a second. Does he still have those maps? Where do those maps lead? Has he ever gone back to that area? Does he know what happens to missing people? And the scariest thing of all is that if he did go to a place of magic and wonder and whimsy, he probably would talk about it. But if you experienced some of the worst torment of your life, it was like just an active war zone of hate and violence, you'd want to forget about it too. So, did Steve Kubacki disappear? Was he one of the lucky ones who reappeared back into our reality? Only he knows the answer. But I still stand by my original statement that portals are scary. Maps are not. Dead Rabbit Radio. I wonder what type of clothes he had. I wonder if he had like snazzier clothes, like nicer clothes. He's like, man, I need to go to the portal more often. It's like a shop in a mall. It's like next to 17 again. No. It's next to Forever 21 and the Taco Bell food court. It's like the portal. It's just like this, whoa, 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 whoa. And you walk in, you come back out with someone else's clothes and a satchel full of maps. If I was a fashion designer, I would add satchels of maps to all of my clothes next season. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.